Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This morning's webinar is in partnership with ourselves at the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and flexible working experts Timewise. As shared, this webinar is for business owners, line managers and HR managers who want to think about flexible working as an option for their team members going forward. And this webinar also forms part of Timewise's A Fair Flexible Work Programme for Scotland, supported by our Scottish Government. So in respect of this, we have the pleasure in introducing Mel Binks, who is a Senior HR Consultant with Timewise. And since joining the Timewise team, Mel has worked with numerous organisations to create a more inclusive and agile culture in order to attract, develop and retain talent. Mel is passionate about the design and delivery of flexible solutions which suit businesses and employees alike to create a more flexible work environment for everyone. In a moment, I will hand you over to Mel, but we just wanted to share that our webinar this morning will be a little different, as Mel will share the first part of her presentation and then we will pause for some interim questions, and then Mel will then finish her presentation and answer any further questions that we have. So please take the opportunity throughout this webinar to pop your questions in the Q&A down below. I will now hand you over to Mel, who will begin the first part of her interactive session. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. Thank you very much.
You're
Good
very
morning,
welcome.
everyone, and thank you for joining us on our webinar in conjunction with Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. As Evelyn said, my name is Mel Binks. I'm from an organisation called Timewise. Today, we're hoping to provide you with some insights and advice to embrace flexible working for the long term and use this time and these strange times as a catalyst for change. We've got some practical tools that we can share with you at the end. We've got two guides, one for employers and one for employees, on how to really embed flexible working. We're also going to talk about some of the pitfalls of flexible working, particularly at this time and this very strange time when we're all working in enforced home working, and also provide some examples of what some other organisations are doing now. Bit about Timewise. Timewise, as an organisation, we've been working in the flexible working arena for over 10 years now. We work in four main areas. We work as a consultancy. We work with numerous organisations, and we have a programme called the Flex Positive programme, which really helps organisations embed flexible working at all stages of their management process. We do management training. And also we work with recruitment teams to help with flexible hiring. We also have an innovation unit, which is mainly funded work, where we look at frontline mainly roles to try and unlock some of that flexible roles. We're working in construction, we've worked with nursing, currently we're working in teaching, and we've worked with the Centre for Ageing Better. There's a number of different studies on our website, so do go and have a look if you're interested. We also have the Jobs Index, where what we do with the Jobs Index is that we track roles which are advertised as flexible in the industry. The new index is coming out in December. I think it's December the 8th, so look out for that. And what we look at is what percentage of advertised roles are advertised with some form of flex. The other thing that we do is we have a job site where we advertise flexible and part-time roles, and on there we have 90,000 candidates that we help and are hoping to find their next flexible job or a flexible job. We work with numerous organisations, from Google to Tesco. We work with different government organisations, as well as frontline NHS and other government bodies. So, what do we mean by a flexible job? Well, there are many different ways to work flexibly, but the one that's really hit the headlines recently is working from home. Looking at recent studies, there's been a huge increase, obviously, of working from home during the COVID crisis. We estimate that before the COVID crisis, about 2% of the workforce worked from home, and that's permanently, work from home permanently. And now we see somewhere between 50 and 70% of the workforce working from home permanently. But when we look at the other forms of flexible working, there's been very little change in different forms of flexible working. We've seen some change in flexible start and finishing times, moving from about 19%, we think, to somewhere around 23%, but very little movement in part-time working, in job shares, in compressed week, or in term time working hours. So it's been a very challenging time at the moment. We're all facing huge economic challenges, and a short period that we thought was going to be enforced home working has now turned into a much longer period. And I think we all felt at the beginning of the lockdown and of the restrictions, a lot of us felt the benefits of working from home. We felt the well-being benefits, and people generally felt better about it. But as time has gone on, there has been some more obvious pitfalls and strains as we've gone on through time. We've seen the rise of digital presenteeism, and quite a number of the organisations that we work with who have pulse surveys have been reporting that people are feeling fatigued, that they are feeling that they are their working day has extended. And actually this was borne out by a study by the Harvard Business Review recently, which said that the average working day had actually increased by 48 minutes since the beginning of lockdown. Also, we are in danger of having a two-tier workplace. Although a lot of us are working from home, about 50% of the workforce work outside the home. And what about flexibility for those people? We have people working from home who might enjoy to some extent the flexibility that brings, but then what about the people who can't do that? What kind of flexibility can we offer them? And then we may fall into a different sort of two-tier workplace when we return to the office. We'll have those people who can return to the office and who want to return to the office in some shape or form, although how that will look is really open at the moment. And those people who can't return to the office because they have caring responsibilities or health concerns. And how do we level that playing field in that way as well? There's been numerous studies about how the pandemic has affected women, and how many women, particularly during the time when we were all homeschooling, actually considered quitting the workforce altogether. I think I saw one study that said 46% of women who were homeschooling had considered quitting the workforce, which I completely understand. Now most of the children are back at school, but we do have situations where children are self-isolating for 2 weeks at a time, and we have this situation where we are child-caring intermittently. Childcare options have been vastly reduced. There are less help from grandparents. There are certainly less after-school clubs. And as employers, we need to think about this and how we might offer up some help, but keeping it gender neutral. Also, there's been quite a disproportionate impact on older workers or those with higher health risks. And we need to think about this going forwards and how we're going to manage those people within the workplace and make sure that they're not disadvantaged because of that. But the pandemic has generated numerous opportunities. We have had an explosion of home working in areas that we thought were just not possible. I have never seen so many people in organisations that I thought and had previously said this can't work, working from home, and this has all been very positive. The breaking connection between what someone achieves, the outputs, and the hours that they work, if we can keep that going, this is a fantastic opportunity and a huge chance to reset working practices and consider what we want to change when we get back to the office. But before the pandemic, there were lots of good reasons for flexible working. There's a number of statistics here, a lot of which are from studies on our website. 87% of people we surveyed, and this is from a Talent Imperative, which is a study we did a couple of years ago, said that they already work flexibly or wish they could. And the greatest proportion of people who want to work flexibly are actually millennials. That's 92%. So any organisation who's thinking about entry level or emerging talent needs to think about long-term flexible options within the workplace. Also performance. I think a lot of organisations have been pleasantly surprised through the pandemic, and actually productivity has tended to either stay the same or increase. And there will be a lot of business costs advantages. I know a number of organisations are thinking about closing their big offices down and saving that money moving forwards. Before this, an organisation we work with a lot, EY, actually made savings of £15 million a year by reducing their office footprint. And there's lots of good business reasons why flexibility is a good idea and flexible working is a good idea. There's lots of demand for flexibility. But more importantly, there is a social reason for introducing flexible work. This headline was generated from a Joseph Rowntree study in 2018, and it's about child poverty. And what they said is something that Timewise have been saying for a long time, is that often people will swap flexibility for lower rates of pay. Lots of flexible roles are at the lower end, and actually now we have the pandemic, and we're looking at redundancies, is often those industries such as retail and hospitality, which can offer those flexible shifts to people, which are making people redundant. And it's those people at the lower end of the jobs market that need that flexibility to work that have been affected. If we're going to raise people out of those poverty levels, if we're going to offer people jobs at the skills that they can work to, we need to create more good quality flexible jobs in the market. Okay, what I'd like to do is just invite anybody, if anybody wants to ask any questions at this point, or if there is anything anybody has a query on.
Thank you, Mel. Mel, can I maybe ask one question just while everyone puts their questions into the chat function? You talked earlier about the two-tier return to office. Could you give us some advice with regards to how do we maintain transparency and fairness to everyone when you have some of your workforce working from home or some who may be on the front line and can't work from home?
No, absolutely. And we get this a lot. A lot of our clients talk to us about this, particularly if they have perhaps a manufacturing or a front, front-facing option as well. And the key here is to see what kind of flexibility you can offer. I'll talk a little bit later about how we do flexibility, but it's not about fairness of output. You can't possibly offer working from home to certain sections of your of your team, but what you can do is talk to them about what can be done and what flexibility you can offer. And I'll talk about a little later about some work we did with Tesco, and often it's about people having more control over the shifts that they work and a bit more say in the work that they do and the times that they work. And sometimes a little change can make a lot of difference to people in those front end roles. And particularly when we're talking about scheduling shifts and things, giving people a bit more control and a bit further foresight into the future.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So there's no other questions and answers. Do you want to carry on, Mel?
Carry on, yeah. Okay, so how do we do flex? Okay, this is a slide that we use a lot in Timewise, and we do whole workshops on this, so I can't go into it in too much detail. And it looks really simple, but actually it's fundamental to making flexibility work within your organization. It really has to work for the organization, and it really has to work for the individual's needs. And if the balance isn't right, it's not going to work. I have a colleague who worked for the civil service for many years, and they went too far the other way. They had this idea that they would be very flexible for a while, and they said yes to absolutely every flexible working request. And they found in the end they couldn't actually function, and so almost backtracked and reverted. And then I work with a number of organizations where it's all about the organization's flexibility. We're thinking about things like 0 hours contracts or work to demand, often in the care industry. It's short notice on shifts and things like that. But where flexibility really works is where we've got both sides of the coin, where it works for the individual and works for the organization, which is a lot easier said than done. But when we're designing flex, the starting point is having clarity on roles and responsibilities within your organization. And these are very, very stressful times. Lots of people have got a lot on their plate. They've got a lot of caring responsibilities, health concerns, and other things that are taking up their time at home. And so it's important for managers to really talk to their people and see what is actually doable within a working day. Clarify those priorities and those objectives, because it might just not be possible for all of those things that we used to be able to get done in our role to get done during a working day. And we might just need, for this period of time, to maybe, be a bit more realistic about what's achievable. But the key thing is to measure the outputs, not to measure the time that people are worked. And put on the table, because people have got caring responsibilities, that people could perhaps work in different shifts. I work in sprints during the day because I have caring responsibilities. So I might do the school run, come in, do a sprint until 3 o'clock, stop for a couple of hours, and then do a few hours in the evening. And as long as my work gets done, if that's the kind of pattern that works for your organization, put it on the table. But again, just to watch out here, put it on the table in a gender neutral way. There are fathers out there, and there are parents out there, and there are people with elderly parents and other kind of responsibilities and health responsibilities that will also need that kind of flexibility. So don't fall into the trap of just offering it to people who you think might need it. Also, as managers, we need to think about our own welfare. I think it's very easy as managers to look after everybody else. And there was a study that came out quite recently that said that in these unusual times where we're all working remotely, or lots of us are working remotely who used to work in offices, we are delegating less and taking on more now. And so the danger of burnout is so much higher for us. So we need to look after our own welfare as well. We need to make sure that people have breaks. We're all doing lots of Zoom calls, and it's very easy to do back-to-back Zoom calls all day in a way that we would never organise face-to-face meetings if we were in the office. And as managers, we need to make sure that we're not putting that kind of pressure on our people, but also that we're not putting that kind of pressure on ourselves, that we have those gaps between meetings, that we make enough time in the day to be able to actually action things from those meetings. And we always seem to put Zoom meetings in for an hour. They don't need to be an hour. I know there's a section where you can put them in for half an hour, or put them in for an hour, but say, we're not going to start the meeting yet. We're all going to have a catch up first and see how people are, and add a bit of warmth into everybody's day. And we did a meeting the other day, and we did a short burst at the beginning of what positive thing has happened to everybody this morning. And we had everything from my brown bin's been collected today, yay, to I got a coffee from my husband, or just something warm that will cheer people up during the day. But the key thing with this is to really keep talking to your people. I know a lot of larger organisations have been doing regular pulse surveys on how their people are feeling, and that's great if you have that capacity. If you're a smaller organisation, just keep talking to your people. I saw a rather disturbing study the other day, and it was from the IBM Institute. And it's about discord between what managers and organisations think and what employees think. And they surveyed the managers of companies to see how they felt they were doing on providing clear guidelines and objectives. And 86% of the managers and employers thought that they were doing very well on that. They were providing clear guidelines, and they were providing clear objectives. And then they surveyed the employees, and only 51% of the same employees for those organisations felt that they were actually providing those objectives. So there is a discord there between what organisations think they're providing and what employees think they're providing. And actually it was the same on welfare as well. In that same study, 80% of the employers thought they were doing well on supporting their people in terms of welfare, but then only 46% of the employees felt that the organisation was doing well on supporting them on welfare. So keep those conversations going. Okay, this is another, this is a framework that we use a lot when we're talking about what type of flexible working and when we're designing jobs for flexible working. So we've got the where, which is obviously we're using a lot, remote and home working. And I think when we're thinking about home working, a lot of us are enforced home working at the moment, but when we get the opportunity to go back to the office and organisations are thinking about what they do with their office space and whether they reduce that down, I think we need to think more broadly about what kind of people we have working for us and talk to those people as well. Not everybody's going to be in a situation where home working is conducive to their life. There are a lot of younger people, a lot of entry-level people, a lot of people who don't live in environments where home working is going to work. And I was talking to an organisation the other day who are talking about setting up a hub locally where people can go and rent office space post-pandemic for short periods of time. So there is some, there is some social interaction there if offices do close their big offices. Also, there's the when. At the moment, everyone might not be able to fulfill full-time hours, and I think it's always worth talking to your people about what else they have and whether they want to reduce their hours down or not. Or it might actually suit you in these economic times for them to reduce hours, and it might suit them, might suit you, and might be a win-win situation there. And the how much. This is part-time, job share, reduced hours. So so this is about if you reduce hours down, what do you do with the other half of that work? I've seen a lot of organisations I've worked with in the city where people have moved from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and it hasn't really worked. And the reason it hasn't really worked is because the job design isn't there. If you don't reduce people's objectives, if you don't reduce the outputs that you're expecting from them, then it's very easy to fail in a part-time role. It's a lot harder if you're moving from 5 days down to 3 days. So it's about what happens to those extra days or hours of work. Do you job share it? Do you add somebody else in? Is it okay just to reduce those hours? Or if it's a shift, do you split it somewhere and do a split shift? And also, when we're thinking about full-time work, but with flexible hours, it's worth thinking about, is it okay? Does it work for our organisation if people work in sprints, in different parts of the day, as long as that work gets done at the end? Does that work for us? And as an organisation, what we'd encourage you to do is to think about all of these things. Think about what you could offer, put together your framework for flexible working, and then put it on the table for everybody. Historically, flexible working has been on a kind of request response. Somebody has come and asked for something, then you've had to think about whether you might be able to fit it in, and then you've said yes or no, based on whether that works or not. But the COVID crisis has really put us in a different situation where everything has been a bit more on the table. So if we think about things in terms of an organisational, what's available on an organisational level, it'll make things a lot more straightforward when we go back into the office or when there are different office options available. As I said at the beginning, we've got two guides which we'll be sending out following the webinar. We've got we've got a guide for employers, and we've got a guide for employees on how to broker a flexible job. This is a toolkit. It will help you start those conversations with your people. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to break the ice or to think about what to talk to people about if you're trying to get to the root of what might work and what might not. So there's a whole section here from performance expectations to tools and technology to what's working well on the health and well-being front, and about collaboration and engagement. And what we're finding is that the organizations that are doing really well through this pandemic have got the tech right on a basic level, but it's the communication that's really working. They're talking to their people regularly. They're thinking of creative ways of working that's working for everybody. And if you work in an organization where that's organized mainly in teams, then we find that devolving those conversations and empowering those teams to have conversations at team level works really well. So usually a team will be able to organize or come up with some very good ideas on how they introduce some flexibility into their into their work. And this is a tried and tested method that we've worked with a number of organizations. And this picture here is actually from Tesco. And what we did with Tesco was we worked with them on a number of their Midlands stores and with their managers, and we looked at shift patterns. And it was just a small change really that really helped. What they wanted was they wanted to have more control over the shifts that they work, and they wanted to have more visibility moving forwards on when they were going to be working. Quite straightforward things really. So what we did, we increased their ability to pick their shifts, and we increased the visibility from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. And their work-life balance scores went up from 44% to 91%. Huge win for the organisation, huge win for those managers. Again, that win-win situation worked for them. But none of this works without leadership. And actually, engaging your leadership or engaging the leadership is hugely important. What we found is if the leadership is engaged, if they can see the vision and the benefits of flexible working, then they can walk the walk and show the way. We talk about leaving loudly actually at Timewise, and it's about showing that you can manage your workload within your working hours. Hopefully you can as a leader, and that you are flex positive, you embrace flexibility throughout your organization. Some things that some of our clients do very, very well is they showcase some of their senior managers in terms of what flexible working they do, and they will, celebrate those people who work 3 days a week, or who might work in a job share or work part-time. And we do that as well. On our Timewise website, you will see a number of organizations and a number of leaders who do this. And I think sometimes the art of the possible really can lead the way for people. So key steps in planning for the longer term. So you really need to understand the needs of your organisations. I'm sure you all do. But it's really about talking to your people, the individual employees, empowering your teams to have these conversations and to see what might be possible. Having a think about a strategy and how flexible working might support these, and how your flexible working strategy framework might look for the future. Putting that on the table and making sure that it's available to everybody, not just those people who come and ask for it. And the key thing really that organisations that we work with that do this really well is to integrate flex into core people processes. So we work a lot with organisations at the front end when they're recruiting. We look at how they recruit, about how they advertise, about putting flexibility on the table in terms of their advertising, about into the recruitment process, then into their promotional process, and the performance management process as well. And actually we did a study with the CMI a few years ago, and we talked to managers, and only 1 in 5 of the managers that we spoke to had actually had a conversation about flexible working in a performance management review. So it's really about getting it on the table, talking about it openly, because I think the floodgates are well and truly open with the COVID crisis. These are just some some ideas from some other organisations that we've worked with, and a lot of these organisations have been working for many years on improving their flexible working culture. So it's not something they've just been doing since the pandemic. But if I pick out a few, Lloyds Banking Group have worked very, very hard on flexible working, and actually they have a policy of advertising every role, and every role is flexible unless it's proved otherwise. So they give all their managers a flexible working and flexible hiring toolkit. They invest very heavily in their management training to ensure that their managers can manage remotely and they can manage flexible teams. And also, as I say, they're very, very hot on flexible hiring as well. And if you want to see a few more examples, there's a few on our website. And this is a good local example. This is a restaurant in Edinburgh. It was one of our 2019 Employer Awards from our Power 50. You can see a few more of these on our website in that particular section. And I really like this because this is a really good frontline example. It's a restaurant and a kitchen, high pressured, needing lots of creativity. And what Paul did was he introduced a 4-day week, paid for a 5-day week, introduced a 4-day week. Now, I know the restaurant business is under an awful lot of pressure at the moment, so we wish it, but he found that that really, really worked for him. Okay, has anybody got any questions?
Just while we're waiting for the questions, Mel, I have another one, if that's okay. Earlier you touched on the hiring of young people and offering flexibility in their hours. Are you able to share with us when we are hiring young people at the start of their career journeys and new starters, when everyone is working remotely, how do we ensure that these new team members gain the knowledge and build their networks that they would usually do when they're in meetings or face-to-face in the office?
Yeah, I think this is a really big problem that a lot of people have been having. And I think when you join a team remotely, you can feel very disconnected from the organisation. And often at this time now, people are joining organisations and they've never met anybody in that organisation before. So it can feel very remote. And I think this is where your outside work activities come into play. I know a lot of organisations are doing sort of lunchtime meetups, people are doing cocktail hours after work, people are doing book clubs online. So an organisation doing yoga at lunchtime for their team. And I think that's where you can really have those more informal conversations and bring people in. But I think from a work perspective, it's really important to introduce a really strong mentoring scheme, and that when you do introduce new team members, that you have a very solid plan of who is going to be working with them and introducing that knowledge, and have a few other people in there as well to mentor outside that. It takes a lot more organisation than it might do perhaps if you were face to face in an office where somebody could just sit next to somebody and listen to them. But it's really worth it in the long term from a retention and an inclusion point of view as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody always remembers, no matter how many years Mel they've been in an organisation, they remember their first day or their first week in a new role, and they sort of find comfort in that as well. So no, thank you for that. We've got a few questions, if that's okay. Mel, what would be your top tips on speaking to your team and making sure you can provide support to them in their roles when they're on flexible working agreement?
I think the key thing really is to understand your people more, to really, when you're talking to everybody, I think it's really understanding where people are at in their lives and understanding what's going on for them. Monitoring and evaluation is a huge issue at the moment. I think when we started in this pandemic, we all thought that it was going to be a short-term thing, and all of our performance management and monitoring and evaluation is geared up for people who are actually in the office and who you have seen. And I think, to be honest, what we're going to have to do this time is we're going to have to be very kind, because people have been working very hard at home. And if somebody does slip through the net, perhaps this time, well, we'll pick them up at some other time if they haven't quite been working as hard as we thought they might do. Because most people have been working incredibly hard at this time. I have heard some horror stories of some organisations monitoring very heavily when people are actually online, and monitoring the time that they have been online and in meetings, etc. But I think we need to move away from that, and I think we need to put some really strong investment into our managers right now, because we can't expect people to manage in this unusual way without some training. People don't generally manage, or haven't historically managed, remote teams, and so it's really important to put that knowledge into your management team. And also we need to think about, from a people perspective, how we move from managing through time to managing through outputs as well, and making sure that those outputs are clear and that everybody's agreed up front as well. Hope that helps.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Also, you touched on the success of Tesco's with regards to the 2 weeks to the 6 weeks. Maybe just kind of sort of share with us, what was the reason for the 2 to the 6 weeks? Was it the fact that the employees had the foresight to be able to plan for obviously, rather than a 2-week window, to plan in that 6-week window?
Yeah, absolutely. And that foresight into planning actually opens up those roles to so many more people. Mm-hmm. Because for those people who've got caring responsibilities or childcare issues, 2 weeks is not long enough to be able to organise childcare or care for relatives or organise your life around that. But 6 weeks is, and if you can work in a 6-week rolling programme, then you can get that level of organisation there, and it opens up those roles to people who potentially couldn't take them previously. And it's about thinking about opening up and making good quality flexible jobs available.
Great, a wonderful example. Thank you for sharing that with us, Mel. So I'll hand back to you.
Okay, lovely. Right, what I'd like to do next is introduce Geraldine from Flexibility Works, who is going to tell us about her organisation. Welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you so much, and thanks for that excellent presentation. Thank you for inviting me on this morning to join. I'm Geraldine Higgins from Flexibility Works. We've known Mel and Emma and Timewise for a number of years now, and due to the work that they do on the flexible work agenda, so many employers and people throughout the UK are reaping the benefits and benefiting from flexible working. And I've been working on this agenda along with our co-founders Nikki Slowey and Lisa Gallagher here in Scotland for over 6 years. We've been supporting employers to create more flexible workplaces. And earlier in this year, in April actually, we launched Flexibility Works, which was an interesting time to launch a new organisation, as I'm sure you can appreciate, but it's been a busy year so far because many employers are looking for support in this area. So we're a social business supported by the Scottish Government and the Hunter Foundation, and what we do is really work practically with employers. We provide line management support for managers. We provide coaching for senior leadership teams to help establish a clearer vision of flexible working and where they're going strategically. We also run training and support with employee engagement tools and analysis to better understand what people are looking for within your organisation in terms of different ways of working, which has been really useful over the course of the last 6 months. We run knowledge sharing webinars, business to business webinars, which are free to join. And we also carry out research and comment in the media to keep flexible working on the agenda for everyone. Another important part of our work in Scotland is that we're specifically funded by the Hunter Foundation to deliver pro bono projects each year, concentrating on lower income sectors. We know that traditionally this is an area where people don't have as much flexibility, and that has an impact on opportunities to progress. So if that's something that sounds of interest and is particularly relevant to the organisations that you work in, please do feel free to get in touch. And also, if there's anything else that you've heard from Mel in the presentation today, as I say, we provide practical support on the ground here in Scotland. So if you're looking for more support to embed flexible working within your organisation, or take a more strategic view of what new ways of working will look like going forward post-pandemic, then please do give us a call and we'd be happy to have a chat. Thanks again, Mel, for inviting us to join.
Pleasure, Geraldine. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Now, as I said before, we're going to be sending out some guides following the webinar. But there's also some, and on the back of the guides, it also references these places where you can gain some further support on flexible working, including our excellent organisation Flexibility Works there as well. Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for having us, Evelyn. Thank you for your lovely introduction there, and thank you, Geraldine, for joining us as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.